Hello everyone, I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. Story 1. In Daegu, a city located in southeastern South Korea. This city is surrounded by mountain ranges. In the western district of Dalseong, there is a mountain named Woryong, which stands at approximately 983 feet in elevation. This mountain became the scene of a shocking incident that shook all of South Korea. 5 young boys went to play on the mountain together and then vanished. This case became one of the 3 most mysterious cases in South Korean history, known as the Frog Boys missing case. To understand the details, let's go back to March 26, 1991, a Tuesday. Although it wasn't a weekend, it was a national holiday because local parliamentary elections were taking place across South Korea. For children, a day off school meant excitement and joy. At 8:20 a.m., 6 boys gathered to play together. They were Kim Jong-sik, 9 years old, Park Chan-in, 10 years old, Kim Yong-gyu, 11 years old, Jo Ho-yeon, 12 years old, Woo Chol-won, 13 years old, and Kim Tae-ryong, 9 years old. All of them were students from 3rd to 6th grade at CNSE-ho Elementary School in Daegu, a school located at the base of Woryong Mountain. Their homes were also in nearby villages. At that moment, they were playing near Jo Ho-yeon's house. While they were playing, a young tenant from the house came outside, complaining about the noise and telling the children to play elsewhere. The boys then huddled together, discussing where to go next. Someone suggested going to Woryong Mountain to hunt for fire salamander eggs. Fire salamanders are amphibians that inhabit forests and hills, laying between 10 and 60 eggs at a time. After agreeing on their destination, the group dispersed, each heading home to grab supplies and inform their families. Of the 6 boys, only Kim Tae-ryong mentioned his plans to his parents. However, his parents deemed the mountain too far and forbade him from going. Reluctantly, he had to abandon the trip. The remaining 5 boys gathered supplies. Some brought empty containers for the eggs, while others carried wooden sticks. They laughed and joked as they made their way toward Woryong Mountain. The morning passed quickly, and soon it was noon. The boys' parents, noticing their children hadn't returned home, assumed they were too absorbed in playing and didn't worry much. It wasn't until 6:30 p.m. that Kim Young-gyu's mother, while busy with housework, suddenly felt uneasy. She stopped what she was doing and went outside to look around, but the streets were eerily quiet and her son was nowhere to be seen. By now it was dark. Although the place the boys had gone to play was not far from their homes, and they had been there before, it seemed unusual that they hadn't returned yet. The longer Kim Young-gyu's mother thought about it, the more worried she became. She decided to leave the house and visit the homes of her son's friends to search for him. On the way, she noticed many people gathered and talking. As she approached, she learned that the 5 boys who had gone to the mountain that morning still hadn't returned. The parents quickly organized themselves, grabbing flashlights, and headed to the mountain to search for the children. They called out their children's names as they searched, but there was no response. After searching for a long time without any sign of the boys, at 7:50 p.m., the parents descended the mountain and reported the incident to the police station. However, the police did not immediately launch a search operation. That day, local parliamentary elections were taking place across the country, and most police officers were deployed to maintain order. Moreover, less than 24 hours had passed since the boys' disappearance. The officer on duty reassured the parents not to worry, suggesting that the children would likely return home soon. Unsatisfied with the police's inaction, the parents didn't give up. They returned to the mountain to continue searching, this time joined by some kind-hearted neighbors. Unfortunately, that evening it started to rain, making the search even more difficult. Clad in raincoats and armed with flashlights, they scoured the slopes of Woryong Mountain. By 3 a.m., everyone was exhausted and had to halt their search, returning home. The following day, more than 300 people, including police officers and military personnel, were mobilized to search Woryong Mountain. By the afternoon, helicopters were also deployed to assist in the search. However, there was still no trace of the 5 boys. Meanwhile, the police began canvassing the area, questioning residents living near the mountain. From these efforts, they gathered some testimonies from witnesses. Jo Ho-yeon's older brother, the sibling of one of the missing boys, told police that around 9 a.m. that day, he was biking home and passed by the base of the mountain. He saw his younger brother with 4 other boys heading up the mountain. When he asked where they were going, his brother cheerfully replied that they were searching for fire salamander eggs. The older brother reminded him to return home for lunch before heading on his way. Another witness, a woman, reported to the police that at approximately 9:30 a.m., after casting her vote in the election, she saw 5 children carrying boxes and sticks as they happily walked toward Woryong Mountain. She overheard them discussing whether they would have time to return home for lunch. Since she was in a hurry to get home, she didn't pay much attention to them. A student named Hyun Sung, who also provided testimony to the police. He stated that he and the 5 missing boys were students at Songseok Elementary School in Taegu. However, he didn't see them that day. Hyun explained that he and some other classmates also went up Woryong Mountain that morning to search for fire salamander eggs. Around 11:30 a.m., Hyun reached the cemetery area on the mountain when he suddenly heard a loud scream from afar. About 10 seconds later, there was another scream, 2 in total. The sound was terrifying, unlike the playful shouting of children. Frightened, Hyun didn't dare investigate where the screams were coming from. The parents of the boys believed the screams could have been cries for help from the victims after being attacked. However, the police dismissed this lead, as another witness claimed to have seen the 5 boys near the mountain's base around noon that same day. The police speculated that the screams might have come from birds or wild animals on the mountain. Additionally, other witnesses provided further information. For instance, a 42-year-old villager reported seeing 5 boys playing near a pond close to the village at around 4:30 p.m. that day. However, it's important to note that all witness accounts were based on personal memory and could be inaccurate. These inconsistencies significantly impacted the police's judgment. The police initially suspected that the boys may have had conflicts at home and ran away out of frustration, only to get lost and unable to find their way back. However, the parents firmly rejected this theory. They insisted their families were harmonious, and they never scolded or hit their children. The boys had no reason to suddenly run away. Among the 5, the oldest was Woo Cheol-won, age 13, and the youngest was Kim Jong-sik, age 9. It seemed highly unlikely that such a group of young children would decide to run away together. The investigation then shifted to the theory of a crime by an acquaintance, suspecting that someone known to the victims' families might have been involved. However, after thorough investigation, the police concluded that the boys' families were honest, well-regarded, and maintained good relationships with their neighbors. There had been no conflict significant enough to provoke such a cruel act against innocent children. Subsequently, the police considered the possibility of kidnapping. 3 days after the incident, on March 29th, Kim Jong-sik's father and uncle received phone calls from an unidentified man. The caller, who sounded about 30 years old, claimed to have kidnapped the boys and demanded a ransom of 4 million won, approximately $2,850 US dollars at the current exchange rate. Kim Joo-hwan, Kim Jong-sik's father, quickly gathered the money and rushed to the designated meeting point on Woryong Mountain. He waited for hours, but no one showed up. Afterward, the caller never made contact again. Following the incident, the young tenant near Jo Ho-yeon's home was filled with regret. He blamed himself, thinking that if he hadn't told the boys to leave that day, they might not have disappeared. The police also faced harsh criticism from the public for failing to act promptly and losing the golden window for locating the children. Initially, news of the incident spread only within the village and nearby areas. Later, the disappearance of the 5 boys was picked up by the media, attracting nationwide attention. Early reports stated that the boys had gone to the mountain to catch frogs, which led to them being nicknamed the Frog Boys. However, the truth was that they had gone to look for fire salamander eggs. To simplify things for the public, the name Frog Boys continued to be used and is still widely recognized today. By April 1st, 6 days after the incident, the parents of the Frog Boys had printed 50,000 flyers to distribute at train stations, bus stops, and other crowded public places across Taegu. They also offered a reward of 2 million won for any useful information about their children's whereabouts. The case grew increasingly serious, eventually catching the attention of South Korea's then-president, Roh Tae-woo. Deeply concerned, President Roh ordered the police to use all available resources to investigate the case. Following the president's directive, police and military forces worked together to thoroughly search Woryong Mountain and the surrounding areas. Every inch of land was meticulously examined. Near Woryong Mountain, there was a reservoir where a child had previously drowned. leading some to suspect that the boys might have gone there after playing on the mountain. To verify this theory, rescue teams pumped the water out of the reservoir, but nothing was found. As public interest in the case grew, the family's phone numbers were leaked to the public. The police installed wiretapping devices on these lines, anticipating potential leads. Indeed, they received numerous calls, but most were from pranksters. Some calls featured children's voices, followed by abrupt hang-ups. After investigation, police concluded that the majority of these were hoaxes. However, it remained possible that the real perpetrator had called, though no conclusive evidence could be established. In August 1992, the police received a call from an unidentified man who claimed that the Frog Boys were buried in the basement of a building in Gyeongsangbuk-do. When pressed for more details, the man immediately hung up. The building he described was the only high-rise with a basement near the boys' homes. The police investigated thoroughly but found nothing, ultimately concluding that this too was a malicious prank. During the search process, tensions arose between reporters accompanying the police and local residents. The months-long investigation yielded no results, leaving the boys' parents utterly devastated. Despite the constant disruptions caused by false leads, the police remained hopeful, considering the possibility that the boys were still alive, perhaps kidnapped or sold elsewhere. The reward for finding the Frog Boys was raised to $42 million, equivalent to $30,000 US. Desperate to find their children, the boys quit their jobs, pooled their resources to buy a truck, and traveled across Taegu and even nationwide distributing flyers. Some businesses volunteered to help by printing the photos on phone cards, cigarette packages, food packaging, and even creating TV advertisements for missing persons. One company even featured their images on a giant hot air balloon. By November, the police had received nearly 1,000 calls, but the vast majority turned out to be false leads. By November 1992, a year and a half after the incident, a movie titled Comeback Frog Boys, inspired by the case, was released. The case once again shocked South Korea and became a hot topic of national conversation. Due to the long-standing deadlock in the investigation, numerous rumors began to circulate. Some speculated that the boys had been kidnapped by North Korean spies. Others suggested they had been abducted by individuals suffering from Hansen's disease to be used in treatments. Despite the implausibility of these claims, the police investigated them. However, the results yielded nothing, and tensions even arose with patients during the investigation process. More fantastical rumors also emerged, including claims that the boys were not human and had been abducted by aliens. Over the course of the extended search, approximately 320,000 people from all walks of life, including military personnel, participated in the efforts. In 1995, for years after the boys, the police used computer technology to create age-progressed portraits of the Frog Boys and printed them on flyers. Over 2 million flyers were distributed, but the effort only led to false reports. Desperate, the police even turned to shamans for assistance in locating the boys. As time passed, the case gradually faded from public memory, and the parents, burdened by life's demands, had to return to work to make a living. In January 1996, Professor Kim Kwon, a criminal psychology expert from the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, KAIST, made a shocking claim. He alleged that the Frog Boys had been murdered by Kim Jong-sik's father, Kim Chil-gyu, and that their bodies were buried in his home. Outraged by the accusation, Kim Chil-gyu vehemently denied the claim, asserting that he could never commit such a heinous act against his own child. KAIST, a prestigious national research university ranked among the top 5 in South Korea, lent credibility to Professor Kim's, taking the institute's reputation into account. The police believed the professor. Though devastated and indignant, Kim Chil-gyu reluctantly agreed to allow the police to excavate his home to prove his innocence. In January 1996, following Professor Kim's directions, the police began digging and demolishing parts of Kim Chil-gyu's house. Curious onlookers gathered outside, eager to witness whether the man was truly a murderer. Police searched every corner of the property, from the bathroom and storage areas to the yard. Reporters were also present, documenting the events. After an hour and 40 minutes, the house was left in ruins, but nothing was found. The crowd fell silent as they stared at the empty, torn-up house. Overcome with emotion, Kim Chil-gyu cried out in anguish. "Losing my child has caused me unimaginable pain, and I've been struggling to survive ever since. Now, someone accuses me of burying my child's body in my home. This is absurd. Following the incident, Professor Kim Kwan faced widespread public criticism. His baseless allegations caused immense harm to Kim Chiljia's family. CAST dismissed Professor Kim and prosecuted him for defamation. Nonetheless, he stubbornly defended his claims and even published a book titled, "The Trident Didn't Go to the Mathin." Although cleared of suspicion, the ordeal left Kim Chilja severely traumatized. He turned to alcohol to cope and eventually passed away from liver cancer in October 2001. Previously, he had been a healthy man, even practicing judo in his youth. However, the grief of losing his child and years of heavy drinking took a devastating toll on his health. Until his death, he never had the chance to reunite with his beloved son. In September 2002, 11 and a half years after the case began, there was finally a breakthrough. On September 26th, Daegu police received a report from a 60-year-old man. He explained that while hiking Waryeong Mountain to gather chestnuts, he had been using a hiking stick to dig through dirt, rocks, and leaves along the path. Midway up the mountain, he uncovered what appeared to be clothing buried in the soil. Curious, he dug further and was shocked to discover a human skull. In fact, a day earlier, police had received a similar report from another caller, who claimed to have seen remains on Waryeong Mountain. However, since the area had already been thoroughly searched and the police had dealt with years of prank calls, they dismissed the report as another hoax. But after receiving the second call, they took it seriously and immediately dispatched officers to the location provided by the informant. At a shallow dirt pit, police uncovered 4 sets of skeletal remains stacked on top of each other with a large rock placed over the bones. Approximately 492 feet away, they found a 5th set of remains. The characteristics matched those of the 5 missing boys. Large and small holes were found on the skulls of 3 sets of remains. The clothing discovered in the soil was not worn in the usual way, but had been separated from the bones and tied together. Although the bodies had fully decomposed, the boys' families identified the clothing as what their children had worn on the day they disappeared. After holding on to hope for over 15 years that their children might still be alive and living elsewhere, the families were left devastated by the confirmation of their deaths. Police hypothesized that the boys had stayed on the mountain playing until late in the evening and then got lost. To avoid losing each other, they theorized the boys removed their jackets, tied them together to form a long rope, and held onto each other's hands. As night fell and the temperature dropped, the boys huddled together for warmth. It was suggested that they may have accidentally fallen unconscious after hitting sharp rocks. However, this theory was strongly rejected by the victims' families. The families argued that their children's homes were located right at the base of Waryeong Mountain. This was not their first time visiting the mountain. They frequently played there and knew the area well. Moreover, the mountain itself was not tall. Even at night, the lights from the houses at the foot of the mountain were clearly visible. The site where the bodies were discovered was only about 1.8 miles from their homes and just 1,640 feet from the nearest village, making it nearly impossible for them to have gotten lost. Near the site, police found over 10 bullet casings and spent shells of various types. Waryeong Mountain was close to a firing range used by the 50th Infantry Brigade of the 2nd Division. This led to suspicions that the boys might have been accidentally killed by stray bullets. However, this theory was quickly dismissed because it was highly improbable for 5 individuals to be struck by stray bullets simultaneously. Moreover, even if someone had illegally used firearms, it was unlikely that no one heard gunshots. After further analysis, police determined that the indentations on the victims' skulls did not match injuries caused by bullets. It was speculated that the bullets had likely been picked up by the boys during their play. The police's excavation of the site, covered by the media, sparked intense public criticism. The public accused the police of acting hastily, failing to preserve the crime scene, and demonstrating a lack of professionalism. Their use of pickaxes to dig, and the casual manner in which they placed the remains into bags, were also heavily condemned. At the scene, the police examined only 1 set of remains and hastily concluded that the cause of death was due to getting lost and hypothermia. However, the forensic team from Gyeongbokgung National University conducted a more thorough autopsy. The results revealed no injuries on the bones of Park Chan-in and Jo Ho-yeon, making it impossible to determine their cause of death. The remaining 3 boys, Woo Chil-won, Kim Jong-sik, and Kim Yong-gyu, showed multiple injuries to their skulls, including fractures and puncture wounds. Kim Jong-sik also had a broken left arm, Among the 5 victims, Wu Chiho-1, the oldest, had the most injuries, with as many as 25 wounds on his body. The exact time of death could not be determined, but it was likely on the day they disappeared. The forensic team concluded that the 5 boys had been murdered. After extensive testing, investigators identified a tool that could have caused the injuries observed on victims' skulls. It was a welding tool with one pointed end and one flat end, commonly used to scrape off welding slag. While not a widely used tool, it is an essential item for welders. However, identifying the perpetrator based solely on this clue proved to be exceedingly difficult. Based on the evidence collected, the police reconstructed the sequence of events as follows. The 5 boys had gone to Waryong Mountain and spread out in the forest to search for fire salamander eggs. At some point, they were suddenly attacked by an unknown assailant. Wu Qiongwen, the 13-year-old and the oldest of the group, resisted the attacker and sustained the most severe injuries. Kim Jong-sik tried to escape, but was caught by the assailant, who struck him hard from behind. As Kim instinctively raised his left arm to shield himself, the assailant used the weapon to deliver a fatal blow to his head, causing him to collapse. Kim Yong-gyu also attempted to flee, but during a struggle, his shirt sleeve and buttons were torn. Ultimately, he too was struck on the head and killed. After the deaths of the 3 boys, the attackers subdued Park Chan-in and Yu Ho-yun to prevent them from escaping. The assailant removed their clothes, tied the garments into makeshift restraints, and strangled them until they stopped moving. This explains the absence of any visible injuries on their bones. Once the 5 boys were lifeless, the assailant buried their bodies in a shallow pit and placed a large rock on top. This may have been intended to prevent the boys from escaping if they regained consciousness or to mark the burial site. After committing the crime, it's possible the perpetrator returned to Waryong Mountain or lived nearby. The attacker's actions seemed both premeditated and impulsive. The premeditation is evident in the choice of weapon, a tool not commonly carried around. It may have been a type of hammer used in construction sites or factories, typically not something someone would carry casually. This suggests the attacker was prepared in advance. However, the impulsive nature is reflected in the fact that the 5 boys likely became random victims. That morning, they had decided to play on the mountain on a whim, with no prior plan. Moreover, murdering 5 people simultaneously is an extraordinarily difficult and risky act, suggesting that the perpetrator may not have specifically targeted the boys beforehand. Expert analyses of the case were quickly picked up by the media, sparking widespread debate among the public. Many questions arose, such as why the victim's hair and teeth, materials that decompose slowly, were missing from the crime scene. This led to speculation that the site where the remains were found might not have been the original crime scene. Additionally, the knots used to tie the clothing at the scene were unusual and not common in everyday life. People also questioned why, despite thorough searches years earlier, the police failed to discover the bodies at the site. The police did not provide a formal explanation for this oversight. Some suggested that the bodies had been buried too deeply and were gradually exposed after 15 years of erosion, rain, and landslides. Others theorized that the remains might have been moved to the mountain later, after police and military searches were completed, exploiting a gap in time for such actions. At the time, Waryong Mountain was a desolate area. Some speculated that the boys might have encountered someone with a history of mental illness or crossed paths with a sociopathic serial killer. Others suggested the timing of the murders, coinciding with local council elections, might indicate a politically motivated act, with the boys tragically caught in the crossfire of someone seeking to create chaos. Near the site, police discovered an artificial cave with a narrow, concealed entrance, just large enough for one person to crawl through. Inside, there were signs of habitation and various objects. Based on the packaging, these items dated back to around the year 2000, nearly a decade after the incident. This suggests that someone began living in the cave only after the murders occurred. In March 2006, 15 years after the crime, the statute of limitations for criminal cases in South Korea expired. This meant that even if the perpetrator came forward, they could no longer be held criminally responsible. That same year, a new rumor began circulating. It alleged that the perpetrator was a family living near Waryong Mountain. The family reportedly had a son with an intellectual disability and owned a hunting dog. Normally, the dog was kept chained, but on the day of the incident, the family supposedly unleashed it to clean and repair its kennel. The son, failing to properly supervise the dog, allowed it to roam free. The dog allegedly attacked the 5 boys playing on the mountain. Fearing exposure, the family purportedly killed the boys to cover up the incident. They then moved away and kept the secret for years. According to the rumor, guilt eventually led them to confide in someone about what had happened. This story spread rapidly among the South Korean public, with many believing it to be true. However, it remains an unverified rumor, with no concrete evidence provided by law enforcement. In February 2011, another film inspired by the Frog Boys case titled The Children was released, once again drawing public attention to the unresolved mystery. By 2015, the police officially closed the investigation. As time passed, public debate about the case gradually subsided. However, in 2021, a comment on social media unexpectedly revived interest in the case. The commenter speculated that the perpetrator might have been a teacher at the boys' school. The reasoning was twofold. First, a teacher would likely be familiar with the area's geography. Second, in the social context of that time, it was common for teachers to use corporal punishment to discipline students, giving them authority to control the boys. Following this claim, some journalists investigated the theory and ultimately concluded it was entirely baseless. A year later, another social media post presented a new hypothesis. The author suggested the murder weapon was a caliper and that the perpetrator could have been a high school student from a nearby school. Calipers, often made of metal, can inflict significant injuries. Investigations revealed that, in some schools near Waryeong Mountain, there had indeed been cases where students used calipers in fights. Additionally, some students were known to gather on the mountain to smoke and drink. Based on this, the post speculated that the boys might have been attacked by a group of delinquent students. However, this theory also sparked controversy. Critics argued that while the injuries on the victims' skulls were similar to those caused by calipers, creating such wounds would require a caliper at least 12 inches long. Such calipers are bulky, difficult to carry discreetly, and easily noticeable. Therefore, the likelihood of this theory being true is considered very low. The disappearance of the Frog Boys remains a haunting memory for the people of South Korea. The case exposed critical gaps in public safety and served as a wake-up call for improving child protection mechanisms. Many parents lived in fear, worried that their own children might face similar dangers. South Korea's 3 most shocking mysteries include the Wazong serial murders, the kidnapping and murder of Lee Hyung-ho, and the disappearance of the Frog Boys. Among these, the Wazong serial murders were solved after 33 years, but the mystery of the Frog Boys remains unsolved. If you haven't seen the video on the Lee Hyung-ho case, I've included a link in the description. Today people believe that with advancements in science and technology, the truth about the Frog Boys case may one day come to light. Story 2. We'll be exploring Taiwan's first documented case of cannibalism. This horrific incident shocked the entire nation of Taiwan and pushed the boundaries of what people thought humans were capable of. Let's travel back to winter 2003 in Taichung City, Taiwan. On December 10, 2003, a young man named Shi Kunji rushed to the Longjing District Police Station in Taichung City to report his sister missing. He told police that his sister, Shi Jin-chi, was 27 years old and worked as an insurance agent for Cathay Life Insurance. 3 days earlier, on the evening of December 7th, Kunji had spoken with his sister on the phone. She told him she was heading to meet a client near Tung Hai University. It was already past 8 p.m., and Kunji felt uneasy about his sister going alone, so he offered to accompany her. However, she declined. Jin-chi assured her brother there was no need to worry, explaining that the person she was meeting was a long-time client. The owner of a motorcycle repair shop next to the martial arts school named Chen Jinhua. The client had mentioned wanting to refer new insurance customers to her. Jin-chi sounded excited over the phone, saying that if she could secure this contract, she would meet her monthly quota and would treat her brother to a nice dinner to celebrate. Still concerned, her brother insisted on cycling to Chen's shop, planning to wait outside until his sister finished her business and then escort her home. But Jin-chi wouldn't hear of it, telling him to go home and get some rest. Reluctantly, he left, but not before making her promise to return home early. That night, their parents assumed Jin-chi was staying at her brother's place, so they didn't call to check on her. Kunji likewise thought she had returned to their parents' home after finishing her business, so he didn't follow up. No one could have imagined that on the morning of December 9th, Kunji's phone would ring with devastating news. On the other end was a manager from Cathay Life Insurance where his sister worked. When the manager mentioned that Jean Chi had been absent without explanation for 2 consecutive days and asked if anything was wrong, Kunji felt his heart stop. In his statement to police, Kunji explained that his sister had been in a long-term relationship, though she chose to live with her parents rather than moving in with her boyfriend. To everyone who knew her, Jean Chi was a tall, graceful young woman. While not conventionally beautiful, she had an attractive presence that turned heads. Beyond her physical appearance, Jean Chi was known for being gentle, honest, and always cheerful. She lived a relatively private life, maintaining close relationships with only a few friends and avoiding complicated romantic entanglements. As her brother Kunji was well aware that she had many admirers, which is why he often took on the role of protector, always keeping an eye on his sister's safety. Immediately upon hearing about his sister's absence from work, Kunji dropped everything and rushed to the motorcycle repair shop where she was last seen. The shop was located in a 3-story building on Shunxing Road in the Longjing district. The ground floor served as the repair workshop, while the 2nd and 3rd floors were used for storage and living quarters. The location was prime real estate, just a block away from Tunghai University in an area bustling with pedestrian traffic. With growing anxiety, Kunji hurried into the shop. Amid the noise of machinery and smell of motor oil, he found a middle-aged man with cropped hair busy repairing a motorcycle. This was Chen Jinho, the shop owner. When Kunji inquired about his sister's whereabouts, Chen calmly replied that while he had indeed met with Jean Chi on the evening of the 7th, an urgent matter had come up, so they only exchanged a few brief words before she left, agreeing to meet another time. Chen's casual response didn't satisfy Kunji. Following his gut instinct, he insisted on searching the upper and lower floors of the repair shop. However, just as he tried to enter, Chen blocked his path. Not only did Chen hurl vulgar insults, but he physically pushed Kunji out and quickly pulled down the shop's metal security gate. During his interview with police, Kunji expressed his deep suspicions. He knew his sister's habits well. She had never spent a night away from home without notice, and would never disappear without telling anyone. This convinced him that Chun must have done something to her. The next morning, the entire Su family returned to the motorcycle shop, demanding to search the premises. Surprisingly, Chen's demeanor had completely changed from his aggressive behavior the previous day. He now welcomed the Char family with unusual politeness and friendliness. Clinging to a faint hope of finding their daughter, the family meticulously searched all 3 floors. However, despite their thorough inspection, they couldn't find a single trace of Jean Chi, not even a strand of hair. Completely devastated, the Su family left the repair shop and immediately reported the case to the police. While suspicion is one thing, criminal charges require concrete evidence. Notably, the name Chen Jinhua immediately caught the attention of Tang Guichong, the chief of the Criminal Investigation Division. As it turned out, Chen Jinhua wasn't unfamiliar to law enforcement. His name had been on their special watch list for some time. Chief Tang recalled that on March 1, 1991, a Tunghai University student named Su Rufin had vanished at Chen's motorcycle repair shop. At the time, Su was working as a part-time insurance agent to earn extra income and had contacted Chun to discuss an insurance policy. This led to Chun being named the prime suspect in that case. During the 1991 investigation, Chun claimed he had been visiting his pregnant wife that evening. According to his statement, when he returned to the shop, Su was nowhere to be found. Chun used this as his alibi. However, through careful investigation, police discovered a suspicious gap of approximately 90 minutes, during which Chin couldn't account for his whereabouts. Despite this, without concrete evidence linking Chin to the crime, the police had reached a dead end in their investigation. 12 years had passed, and now 2 female insurance agents had disappeared from the same location, a coincidence too suspicious to ignore. Since his early days as a junior officer, this case had left an indelible mark on Tang's memory. The image of Su's motorcycle still parked in front of the shop while its owner had vanished haunted him. Although Chun was the primary suspect, the police couldn't find any decisive evidence, leaving the case as an unresolved burden weighing on Tang's conscience. Over those 12 years, police had brought Chun in 3 times for polygraph tests, specifically questioning whether he had met Su on the day of her disappearance. Though Chun consistently denied any meeting, he failed all 3 polygraph tests. However, as law enforcement professionals know, polygraph results aren't admissible as evidence in court. Now 12 years later, Tang had been promoted to Chief of Criminal Investigation, while Chun had entered middle age. This could be their last chance to bring the suspect to justice. This new case drew intense attention from local law enforcement. Whether or not these cases were connected, the area had seen several unsolved female disappearances in recent years, with the perpetrators still at large. With Chun Jin-hwa, their previous person of interest, once again linked to a missing person case, police were determined to use this opportunity to thoroughly investigate his background. Chun Jin-ho was a local, born and raised in the area, into a poor family with 9 children, 4 boys and 5 girls. His parents worked as day laborers to support their large family. Perhaps due to his difficult circumstances and learning challenges, Chun dropped out after 8th grade. Despite attending middle school, he remained nearly illiterate, unable to read all the characters on his own ID card. After leaving school, Chin apprenticed at a motorcycle repair shop. It wasn't until his mid-20s that he managed to save enough to open his own small shop. Though poorly educated, Chin showed a natural talent for mechanical repairs. His skillful work gradually earned the trust and recognition of local residents. From this perspective, Chin appeared to be someone who had worked his way up from poverty through his own efforts. Chin was quickly brought in for questioning, but he steadfastly denied any knowledge of Su Jinji's whereabouts. However, he hadn't counted on modern technological advances making criminal investigation much more efficient. The evidence police had gathered quickly began to unravel his lies. On the afternoon of the initial report, investigators quickly gathered surveillance footage from cameras around the repair shop. Video from a nearby 24-hour convenience store captured Jinji entering the motorcycle shop shortly after 8 p.m. Significantly, there was no footage of her ever leaving. This anomaly strengthened police suspicions. During questioning, remained unusually calm, evading questions and denying the evidence police had uncovered. Officers noticed something strange about Chen's behavior. Even highly educated people with high IQs typically stumble when faced with intense police questioning. While Chen appeared less intelligent than average, his answers were suspiciously perfect and rehearsed. Acting on these suspicions, police quickly obtained a search warrant for the repair shop. With no concrete evidence yet found, Chen was temporarily released. Unexpectedly, he disappeared immediately after leaving the police station. Armed with a search warrant and accompanied by a police dog, officers arrived at Chen's 3-story repair shop. The security gate was locked, and no one responded to their loud knocking. While they suspected Chun had fled to avoid prosecution, their immediate priority was searching the premises for evidence. Fortunately, they were able to obtain a spare key from Chen's wife. When they opened the door, they found the first floor in disarray. An unfinished motorcycle repair job, tools and items scattered across the floor, making it difficult to distinguish between useful evidence and debris. Moving to the second-floor living area, they found a space covered in dust and grime, appearing long neglected. However, one detail stood out. In the otherwise filthy bathroom, the bathtub was suspiciously clean and shiny, clearly having been recently scrubbed. Before investigators could analyze this further, the police dog suddenly began barking frantically and pulled officers toward the 3rd floor. Everyone quickly followed. The dog stopped in front of a cylindrical stainless steel water tank, its barking growing more intense. A tense atmosphere immediately filled the air. At that moment, a powerful stench began emanating from the tank. While such water tanks were common in Taiwanese homes, this one appeared abandoned, covered in a thick layer of grime. When officers opened the tank's lid, everyone instinctively covered their noses against the overwhelming smell of decay. They located the source of the horrific odor at the bottom of the tank. From the tank's depths, police retrieved 2 heavy black plastic bags. When opened, the contents shocked everyone present. A severed human head, dismembered limbs, chunks of flesh, and white bones stripped clean of meat, along with what appeared to be blood-soaked internal organs. The scene was beyond anyone's worst expectations. Police immediately sealed off the crime scene to continue their investigation. They quickly discovered a destroyed Nokia phone in a trash bin. Next, they sprayed luminol in the 2nd-floor bathroom. The chemical reaction revealed numerous blue fluorescent spots on the walls and floor around the bathtub. Since this reaction only lasts about 30 seconds, officers rapidly photographed the evidence. This confirmed the bathroom as the primary crime scene. Jean Chi's brother and parents rushed to the scene upon hearing the news. Despite police attempts to stop them, they ran to where the remains were found. Though severely decomposed, the father immediately recognized his daughter from what remained of her face. Overwhelmed by the horrific discovery, he broke down sobbing before fainting. The search revealed more disturbing discoveries. In a corner of Chen's room, investigators found a large patterned snake coiled up, making their blood run cold. They also discovered a collection of pornographic videos and sex toys, providing insight into Chen's deviant interests. While all evidence now pointed to Chun, he had vanished without a trace. Where could he be? According to Chen's wife, he was 39 years old, and they had 3 sons. Initially, their life had been relatively stable. Chen's motorcycle repair skills were well respected in the community, allowing him to establish his own shop. However, his wife ultimately left him because she couldn't tolerate his special interests. Though Chin appeared introverted and honest on the surface, he harbored a completely different side. From childhood, frequently beaten by his family, he developed disturbing behaviors. Instead of going home, he would often wander to secluded areas to catch and torture small animals. These pathological tendencies continued after marriage when he decided to keep snakes in the house, terrifying not only his wife and children, but also keeping neighbors at bay. Local residents all sensed something deeply unsettling about Chin. Most alarming were reports from several neighbors to police about Chen's suspicious behavior. He would often stand at his doorway, leering at passing young women with predatory eyes. These behaviors further confirmed his underlying pathological nature. Police theorized that given Chen's personality and circumstances, he wouldn't flee far from familiar territory. This prediction proved correct. Shortly after, authorities located Chun in his rural hometown. When arrested, he was carrying a betel nut knife, a potential weapon, yet maintained an eerily calm demeanor despite facing police. Even more striking was how Chun handled the accusations. Not only did he deny any involvement in the crime, but he also feigned outrage, declaring that the real perpetrator was cruel and must be caught. Though police had found the dismembered remains and blood evidence in the repair shop, they knew these weren't enough to secure a conviction against Chin. They needed eyewitnesses and direct physical evidence. In their search for murder weapons, they even excavated the underground drainage pipes in front of the shop, but found nothing. Just as the investigation seemed to be hitting a dead end, local media reported a major breakthrough in the Jinchi case. Someone had voluntarily come forward to the police station with crucial information that would help crack the case. The lead came from the technical team monitoring the victim's phone. They detected an unusual call from the device. Technical analysis revealed that while the victim's SIM card hadn't been used, the call was made from another SIM card belonging to a woman named Lee. Quick investigation identified Lee as the girlfriend of Guang Di-seong, a 29-year-old apprentice at Chen's repair shop. When police went to question him, they discovered that Guang had also disappeared after the incident. Could his disappearance be connected to the murder? Clearly became another key suspect in the case. During this time, police received an important call from Zhao Yunchong, a local electronics store owner who knew Guang well. He reported that Guang had suddenly brought in a laptop and phone, initially asking to unlock the computer. Guang left the items, saying he'd return later. Given the widespread news about Chen's suspected involvement in the murder, the store owner grew suspicious. After Guang left the laptop, he secretly called the police. Following police instructions, was asked to stall Guang. Half an hour later, Guang returned, saying he had changed his mind and asked if the store would buy the computer instead. After negotiating, Guang agreed to sell it for approximately US to buy more time and create evidence. Zhao had Guang sign a transfer of ownership document. Zhao's clever delaying tactics gave police enough time to respond and successfully arrest Guang at the store. Unlike Chen's unnerving calmness, Guang, with his boyish face, showed immediate signs of panic upon arrest. His composure quickly crumbled under pressure. At the police station, faced with irrefutable evidence, Guang could no longer maintain his silence. He gradually confessed to his role in the crime. His confession also put pressure on the detained Chun, forcing him to acknowledge his involvement. Though interrogated separately, the details revealed by both suspects painted a horrifying picture that shocked even seasoned investigators. Despite his youth, Guang had dropped out of school early. His life quickly spiraled into gambling and vice, leaving him deep in debt. He found work as an apprentice at Chen's shop. Due to the nature of their business, repair shop customers often needed motorcycle insurance, allowing Chen to build a network of connections with insurance companies. This was how Chen had met Jinchi. But what turned this normal business relationship into a bloody tragedy? Combining the testimonies of Chun and Guang, police reconstructed the basic sequence of events. Over 2 years of cooperation had referred many customers to Jinchi. However, recent problems with insurance claims had created tension. The breaking point came when a major claim went wrong, causing one of Chen's customers to storm into the shop in a rage, resulting in Chen losing several business opportunities. As Chen dwelled on this, his anger grew until he made the brutal decision to take revenge on Jinchi. On the evening of December 7th, and after 8 p.m., called to invite Jinchi to the shop using a new insurance contract as pretext. Unaware of Chen's dark intentions, Jinchi happily accepted. Around 9 p.m. when she arrived, Chen introduced her to Guang. The scene appeared perfectly normal, music playing in the shop while Jinchi and Guang sat at a table discussing insurance in a relaxed atmosphere. No one could have imagined these would be Jinchi's final moments. Suddenly, Chen walked toward the door. In an instant, he pulled down the security gate and turned the music volume to maximum. These unusual actions immediately alarmed Jinchi, but it was too late. How could a single woman defend herself against 2 men who had planned their attack? As Jinchi opened her mouth to question why the gate was being closed, Chen brutally struck her lower back with a club. Before she could react, Guang, wearing black gloves he had prepared in advance, quickly looped a thick rope around her neck. The more desperately Jinchi struggled to break free, the tighter Guang pulled the rope. The loud music drowned out any sounds of the victim's distress. Jinchi collapsed to the floor, her head hitting the ground hard. Though unable to scream, she continued struggling desperately, her legs kicking frantically. After about 2 minutes of fighting for her life, her strength ebbed away and her limbs fell limp. Once the 2 attackers confirmed she was unconscious, they dragged her to the second-floor bathroom. There, they committed unspeakable acts of assault against her. Looking at Jinchi in her dying state, began calculating how to dispose of the body. He realized the repair shop's location, so close to Tunghai University, in a busy area surrounded by familiar neighbors, made it impossible to move the body without detection. Therefore, they decided to destroy the evidence on site. To eliminate evidence of their assault, they first used large amounts of water to wash the victim's intimate areas. Using a betel nut knife, they removed her reproductive organs, then proceeded to dismember the rest of the body. They separated the head from the torso and used a utility knife to strip flesh from bone. After more than an hour, both men were drenched in sweat. Chun suggested they eat something. Guang went to the kitchen to prepare food. In an act of unimaginable depravity, he took pieces of the victim's flesh and fried them in oil. When he served them to Chun, the latter ate without showing any emotion. Finally, they placed the limbs and larger pieces of flesh into 2 black plastic bags, tied them tightly, and disposed of them in the water tank on the 3rd floor. The remaining stripped remains, along with Jinchi's clothes and the utility knife used for dismemberment, were placed in a large black plastic bag and thrown into the septic tank behind the repair shop. When interrogated, both men gave largely consistent accounts of the crime's sequence, but differed significantly on one crucial detail. They each blamed the other as the mastermind. In their respective statements, each claimed to be merely an accomplice while asserting the other was the primary perpetrator. Guang testified that he only stopped at sexually assaulting the victim that night. After committing the depraved act, he left. According to Guang, it was Chun who took the victim's cash and computer, then gave it to him to sell. Therefore, he was completely unaware that Chun later dismembered the body alone in the room. By doing this, Guang deliberately distanced himself from the barbaric acts that occurred later and implicitly implied that Chun was the mastermind behind the entire case. Chun, on the other hand, claimed that Guang planned the kidnapping and murder because he was short of money. Chun claimed that he only played a supporting role and had no intention of disposing of the body. He also denied the cannibalism, saying that he only realized the disgusting thing later. So who is the liar? During the subsequent investigation, police recovered various body parts, bones, clothing, documents, and insurance paperwork from the septic tank, matching their confessions. They also found the rope Guang had discarded near the repair shop, which contained Jinchi's DNA. However, the rope bore no DNA from either suspect, corroborating Guang's claim that he had worn gloves during the strangulation. The dispute over who was the mastermind and who performed the dismemberment was resolved through forensic evidence. The autopsy determined Jinchi's time of death at approximately 10 p.m. on December 7th. Forensic experts concluded that the subsequent acts of dismemberment and disposal could not have been performed by one person alone in such a short time frame. This led police to conclude that both Chun and Guang were directly involved in all aspects of the crime. Throughout the investigation, both suspects' testimonies kept changing, lacking consistency. Sometimes they would confess to the murder, then completely deny it. Notably, during questioning, psychiatric experts diagnosed Guang with severe mental disorders requiring treatment in the psychiatric ward. Regarding the cannibalism, repeatedly changed his story. Particularly near the trial date, he adamantly denied all accusations of cannibalism in court. However, media outlets had already dubbed him the cannibal monster. During one interrogation, Chen made a statement that sent chills through everyone present. Vegetarian meat and regular meat taste the same. This immediately made investigators think of Su Ruifan, the vegetarian student who disappeared 12 years earlier. Could she have met the same terrible fate? Tragically, police could never find any evidence linking Chun to Su Ruifan's case. This left both Su's family and the investigating officers with an unresolvable burden of grief. After years of trial proceedings, Chun Jinhua and Guang Deqiang continued to change their stories. Guang would only admit to sexually assaulting Jin Qi, but denied the murder and cannibalism charges. Admitted to the assault and cannibalism, but denied being the killer. In the 2004 initial trial, prosecutors sought the death penalty for Chun and a 20-year prison sentence for Guang. However, the court ultimately sentenced both men to death. In 2005, the appellate court upheld the death sentences. Finally, in 2007, the Taichung High Court finalized their death sentences for premeditated murder. Despite protests from human rights organizations opposing capital punishment, given the exceptionally heinous nature of their crimes, the sentences were carried out on December 21, 2012. Guang died instantly from the first shot. Chun, who had volunteered to donate his organs, was given anesthesia via 4 before being shot in the right brain. After death, was rushed to a local hospital for organ harvesting. Because medical ethics and human rights organizations believe that organ harvesting from death row inmates is a form of brutal torture, the Ministry of Justice has stopped considering organ donation requests to avoid controversy. Even if death row inmates voluntarily donate organs, the Ministry of Justice does not approve them in principle. Therefore, Chen Jinhua became the last death row inmate in Taiwan to be allowed to donate organs. To this day, the case still haunts the people of Taiwan, especially the area around Tung Hai University. This case not only exposes the dark side of human nature, but also serves as a valuable lesson in vigilance in life. Story 3. We'll dive into another case from Hong Kong. The main character and her family turned to a grandmaster, seeking to change their fate, but this decision turned her life upside down. A talented young woman from a wealthy family went missing for 16 years, only to eventually become a mother who took the life of her own child. What did this woman go through? The main character in this case, Li Fengai, was born in 1972. She was the eldest of her family, with one younger sister and 2 younger brothers. Her father was in the transportation business, owning multiple properties in Huangpu, and the family had both a driver and housekeeper. At the time, they were considered quite wealthy, with assets reaching millions of Hong Kong dollars. However, Fengai was frail and often sick as a child, and after her birth, the family's business started to decline. Her parents believed she brought bad luck, viewing her as a jinx. Despite the resentment, Fengai faced her reality with resilience. She attended a government-funded Christian girls' school where instruction was in English and excelled academically. In Hong Kong's graduation exams, with a perfect score of 30, she achieved 28 points. This exam is similar to a college entrance test, compared to academic stars like Gloria Tang, who scored 21, and Gigi Liang, who scored 24. Fengai's performance was exceptional. Additionally, she was known for her kind nature, generosity, and popularity at school. When Fengai was 16, her family faced a major crisis. Her mother discovered her father was having an affair and had a child with another woman, often staying away from home. To save the marriage and keep their family of 6 intact, her mother tried every possible way, but to no avail. One day while getting her hair done at her usual salon, Fengai's mother noticed a small idol on the table with a photo of an unknown man attached. Next to it was a smaller idol with a picture of the hairstylist. Curious, she asked the stylist about it. The stylist explained that it was the Li Ziyangguanian statue, and that the man in the photo was Grandmaster Li Jinshi, who presided over the Guanyin Shenyang Temple in Tunmen. He had many followers, and was known for helping people with blessings and rituals to change their destiny. Upon hearing the words, "change fate," Fengyi's mother was immediately interested. She wanted the grandmaster's help to bring her husband back to the family. After a brief discussion, the hairstylist agreed to arrange a meeting. Soon after, Fengyi's mother took her 4 children to the Guanyin Shenyang Temple, located in the Hangyuer Industrial District in Tunmun. Initially, she wondered why the temple was in an industrial area, but upon entering she saw it bustling with people and filled with incense smoke, which made her believe it must be truly powerful. After seeking Jincheng's ritual, Fengyi's father surprisingly returned to her mother, and harmony was restored in the family. From that point on, Fengyi's family became devoted followers of Jin Shui, offering 50,000 Hong Kong dollars monthly as incense offerings to show their respect. In return, Jin Shui gave them all spiritual names. He showed particular attention to Fengyi, claiming they shared a karmic bond, and bestowed her with the name Miao Yuan. Many might wonder why would they adopt such a strong faith based on a single occurrence. Here, we need to touch on the Lingnan cultural customs in southern China. The Lingnan culture, with its long history, has profoundly influenced the formation and development of the Han people. Hong Kong, Macau, and Vietnam, due to their unique geographic positions, have blended with the local Bayou culture. After experiencing war, colonial times, and the economic boom of the 80s and 90s, folk beliefs reached a cultural peak. From Hong Kong's days as a fishing village, families would light incense to pray for fishermen's safe return. Even now, major construction projects in Hong Kong often require a feng shui assessment before starting. Ordinary people frequently visit temples to pray for their family's peace and well-being. Given this cultural and historical context, it's understandable that Fengyi's mother, in a time of family crisis, turned to mysticism and joined the Guanyin Shenyang Temple. However, she surely didn't expect that this fate-changing ritual would alter Fengyi's entire life. Jin Shi, born in 1952, was 20 years older than Fengyi, with average looks and graying hair. At 18, he had lived with a woman and fathered 3 children. In the 1980s, he also had a criminal record for illegal gambling and assault. This grandmaster not only helped followers and disciples communicate with Guanyin, but also sold them various items such as prayer beads, holy water, sacrificial flowers, Guanyin posters, and other ritual products. The blessing fee alone ranged from a few thousand to 20,000 Hong Kong dollars. For example, Fengyi's mother, besides the 50,000 Hong Kong dollars monthly offering, had to pay an additional 20,000 Hong Kong dollars to place her family's photo in the temple. Additionally, she had to spend 1,300 Hong Kong dollars to obtain a medicinal prescription for the family. Through such business practices, Li Jinshu quickly amassed an enormous fortune. He owned 20 properties, 3 factories, 7 taxi licenses, and a collection of luxury cars, including Mercedes-Benz and Rolls-Royce. Despite his wealth, Jinshu remained unsatisfied, setting his sights on Fengyi, whose attractive appearance made her his next target. After graduation, Fengyi, then 16, was supposed to enter a pre-college program in Hong Kong, but instead chose to work in procurement. In 1993, at 21, after ending a 6-year relationship with her boyfriend, Fengyi began dating a colleague in Shanghai. To be close to him, she frequently flew to Shanghai, staying away from home for months at a time. Because of this, Fengyi's mother mentioned it to Jinshu. The Grandmaster declared that Fengyi's energy had a serious problem that couldn't be resolved through ordinary rituals. He claimed it required a direct transfer of his young energy, or else the entire family would face a terrible disaster. Fengyi's mother, deeply trusting him, immediately urged Fengyi to return to Hong Kong. Once Fengyi returned, Jinshu kept her alone in the temple. The yin-yang transfer he mentioned was, in reality, a physical relationship with Fengyi. Though Fengyi was an adult, she had never gone beyond platonic relationships in her past 2 romances, and was naive about physical intimacy. Her unwavering faith in Lei Xingguan Yin let her trust the Grandmaster's instructions without question. Exploiting her faith, Jinshu told Fengyi that this act would deplete his yang energy, and that he was only doing it because they had a karmic bond from a past life. Hearing this, Fengyi revered Jinshu even more, believing he was sacrificing himself for her family. She followed his instructions, engaging in physical relations multiple times at the Guanyin Shenyang Temple and in nearby hotels. Fengyi hoped Jinshu would change her destiny and protect her family from misfortune. But inevitably, after several encounters, Fengyi became pregnant. Afraid her family would find out, she considered ending the pregnancy herself, but Jinxiu stopped her. The Grandmaster told her that this child was a divine fetus, filled with young energy, meant to bring good fortune to the Li family, and must not be aborted. He went further, warning Feng Yi that this was a cosmic secret that must not be revealed. She was forbidden from telling her family or contacting them, as doing so would lead to dire consequences. However, for an ordinary young woman like her, being out of contact with her family for extended periods would inevitably prompt her parents to report her missing. So, how did Jinxiu manage to keep Feng Yi obedient and undiscovered for 16 years? Li Jinxiu, who was skilled in psychological manipulation, knew he couldn't allow Feng Yi to communicate with her family, nor could he continue supporting her without reason. So he devised a clever plan. He instructed Feng Yi to lie to her parents, saying she was going to study abroad in Australia, and ask them for $50,000. This amount, equivalent to over 200,000 Hong Kong dollars, was substantial. But the family, believing in Feng Yi's academic excellence, agreed without suspicion, requesting only that she write letters home regularly. Jinxiu then relocated Feng Yi to an apartment on the first floor of Qilan Huaiwan in Tunmen to await the baby's arrival. Jinxiu's wife, Liang Yonglan, who also served as his assistant at the temple, lived in the adjacent apartment. Liang Yonglan, 3 years older than Jinxiu, had previously been married and had 2 sons. In 1986, she began living with Jinxiu. Later, both registered as traditional Chinese medicine practitioners and together established the Guanyin Shenyang Temple. Liang was aware of the situation with Feng Yi, but did not object. However, Jinxiu did not allow Feng Yi to go out alone. She was confined to the apartment and did not even have a cell phone. Later, fearing that Feng Yi might need emergency contact while alone, he finally provided her with a cell phone for urgent situations. During this period, Feng Yi considered writing or calling her parents, but Jinxiu firmly forbade it. The only letter she sent was first routed by Jinxiu through Australia before it reached her family. In 1994, at the age of 22, Feng Yi finally gave birth. She wanted to marry Jinxiu to give the child a legal status, but he rejected this idea. Initially, Feng Yi thought that after delivering the divine child, she would be allowed to return to her parents. But unexpectedly, the Grandmaster had no intention of releasing her, keeping her in that apartment instead. Jinxiu gave her 6,000 Hong Kong dollars monthly, but only allowed her to go out to buy essentials. He visited weekly under the pretense of transferring yang energy to satisfy his own desires. In 1995, Feng Yi became pregnant again. However, by this time, she had begun to develop some mental health issues, frequently suffering from insomnia and needing medication to sleep. Seizing this opportunity, Jincheng assigned her first child to Liang Yonglan's. Feng Yi was left isolated, with only Jincheng in her world. After giving birth to her second child, Li Zhaoheng, in 1996, Feng Yi soon became pregnant again. The following year, her third child, a girl named Li Baojiao, was born. Feng Yi was left to care for her second son and youngest daughter alone. It wasn't that she didn't want to care for her first child, but she was seldom allowed to see him. She could only secretly watch from the apartment parking lot as Jin Shui took him to kindergarten. They continued living this way at Qilan Huaiwan. Feng Yi thought she could find solace in her 2 younger children, but her second son, Li Xiaoheng, didn't seem to develop as expected. Likely affected by her use of medication during pregnancy, Xiaoheng developed severe epilepsy and asthma, relying on medication to manage his conditions. He frequently experienced seizures, making it difficult for him to make friends at school. He was often isolated and bullied by his peers. Worried for her son, Feng Yi begged Jinxiu to perform a ritual for him. To her dismay, he not only refused but claimed that her own energy issues were to blame for her son's condition. Sadly, Zhao Hong's health didn't improve over time. It worsened. During his episodes, he would lash out at Feng Yi, sometimes even wielding a knife against others. Feng Yi endured both physical and mental anguish. To change her situation, she began offering tutoring sessions at home, inviting children from the neighborhood to attend. This provided her children with playmates and helped mitigate Zhao Hong's social isolation. Things seemed to be turning for the better, but the truth couldn't be hidden forever. How did Feng Yi eventually escape this life? In 2008, Feng Yi's mother heard rumors about Jin Shui's inappropriate actions. Several followers reported that the Grandmaster often used strange excuses to make unnecessary physical contact with them. Gradually, she realized that the man she had revered for over a decade wasn't an embodiment of Guanyin, but a fraud disguising himself as a virtuous monk. As a result, many followers, including Feng Yi's mother, left the Guanyin Shenyang temple. As the followers departed, Jinxiu's financial support quickly dried up. No longer able to remain passive, he instructed Feng Yi to convince her family to return to the temple. After nearly 15 years of being out of touch, Feng Yi took a phone, created a social media account, found her sister's profile, and urged her and their mother to resume visiting Jinxia for spiritual guidance. When Feng Yi's family received the message from her after so many years, they were initially overjoyed, but soon became concerned because her only purpose seemed to be encouraging them to return to the temple. This raised suspicions in her family that Feng Yi's long disappearance was somehow tied to Jinxia. A few days later, Feng Yi brought her 2 children to her family's home. Although she didn't reveal who their father was, the Li family pieced everything together. Feng Yi's mother was filled with regret. The family wanted her to sever ties with Jinxiu, but, fearing his knowledge of mystic practices and possible retaliation, chose to keep a cautious distance from Feng Yi without confronting the dark truth. One evening, Feng Yi's mother and sister received calls and messages from her, which they did not answer. Feng Yi expressed a desire to move in with her children. Her mother, however, was concerned that Jinxiu might retaliate if displeased. Additionally, Feng Yi's father was undergoing kidney surgery, and their home was not convenient for additional guests. Not wanting to invite more complications, her mother declined. Little did they know this refusal would be the breaking point for Feng Yi. On the evening of October 11, 2009, Liang Yonglin's son from her previous marriage held a wedding reception. Since the event was hosted by Liang's ex-husband, Jin Shi didn't attend. After the wedding, Liang went home alone, while Jin Shui and Feng Yi went to karaoke and then grabbed some food downstairs. Possibly annoyed that Liang allowed her ex-husband to host the wedding, Jin Shui drank heavily. Meanwhile, Feng Yi, harboring resentment toward Liang for previously taking her child, called Liang and yelled, saying, "The child of a disgraceful woman like you shouldn't carry the Li surname." The call angered Liang, sparking a heated argument with Feng Yi. When they returned home, the 3 of them engaged in an even fiercer confrontation. Feng Yi accused Liang of not being Jinxiu's legitimate wife. In response, Liang revealed that Jinxiu had been with numerous other women, all of whom had children with him, some even before Feng Yi. She taunted Feng Yi, suggesting that she didn't even rank as mistress number 9 in Jinxiu's life. Hearing these words, Feng Yi broke down completely. She confronted Jinxiu, asking if it was true. In his drunken state, he replied, "Your skills in bed are terrible, which is why I never stay overnight here." Seizing Feng Yi's vulnerability, Liang Yonglan smugly exposed that Jinxiu had no spiritual powers at all. It was all just a scheme to swindle money. Feng Yi couldn't believe that the faith she had held for over a decade was a complete lie. All the suffering she had endured was only to satisfy the desires of a fraud disguised as a spiritual leader. From beginning to end, she was nothing more than a plaything. The next day, refusing to accept this, Feng Yi clung to a sliver of hope and called Jinxiu, hoping to hear the truth directly from him. But Jin Shi ignored her calls all day. She also tried calling her mother and sister, but neither answered. On October 13th, as she had planned a barbecue outing with her tutoring students, Feng Yi went to the store to buy charcoal and juice. However, after teaching for a short while, her mental state worsened, and she had to end the class early and send the students home. Once back at her apartment, she kept calling and messaging Li Jin Shi, her mother, and her sister. But none of them responded. Thoughts began to torment her. No one cares about me. No one loves me. What is the point of my existence? Around 10 p.m., she was still trying to call them. Concerned about disturbing her children's sleep, she took out the medication her doctor had prescribed for insomnia, broke the pills in half, and mixed them into orange juice for her children. After helping her children lie down, she saw that Jin Shi still hadn't responded. Feng Yi found herself wondering, will anyone care for my children? What am I to him with all those other women? Feng Yi lit incense, praying that the Grandmaster would reveal the truth while continuing to call. All she heard in response was a busy signal. Gradually, her emotions spiraled out of control, and she began taking pills herself while dragging a charcoal grill into her room to light. Neighbors noticed black smoke coming from the apartment and sensed something was wrong, so they called the fire department. Around midnight, firefighters arrived and saw smoke coming from the apartment door, so they knocked. Hearing the noise, Fungi woke up and explained to the firefighters that she was burning incense, apologizing for the disturbance. The firefighters, still concerned, asked to check inside, but Fungi declined, saying she didn't want to wake her children. The firefighters reluctantly treated it as a goodwill check and left. Once everyone had gone, Fungi took 2 more pills and lay down with her children. The next day at 1 p.m., Fungi woke up to find her children unresponsive. Her first action wasn't to call for emergency services, but to contact Jinshio, asking him to perform a ritual to save them. But again, he didn't answer. Fungi left a voicemail saying, "If anything happens to the children, you are the beneficiary of the insurance." Yet, even after this, Grandmaster Jinshio did not come. Fungi then called Liang Yonglan, telling her that the 2 children were unresponsive and that she had killed them. Liang, thinking Fungi was joking, replied, "If that's true, go ahead and call the police." In utter despair, Fungi lit another charcoal basin and took more pills. Perhaps fate had other plans for Fungi, as despite consuming numerous pills and inhaling the charcoal smoke, she did not suffer fatal poisoning. Around 3 p.m., she awoke. Seeing her children without any signs of life, she called the police and reported that she had committed murder. When the police arrived, both children showed no signs of life. According to preliminary analysis, Fungi likely had slowed her breathing due to the overdose, absorbing less carbon monoxide than the children, which spared her from fatal poisoning. What legal consequences would Fungi face? And what role did Li Jianqi play in this tragedy? After extensive investigation and evidence collection, the case was formally brought to trial in November 2010. A key question was whether Fungi's act of lighting the charcoal with her children present was intentional. In defense, her lawyer argued that Fungi had suffered from severe bipolar disorder since her second pregnancy. She struggled to appear normal to avoid burdening others, but her illness persisted. Coupled with the recent mental shock, this extreme action was seen as an act of release. As a mother, she may have wanted to spare her children from further suffering. Parents of students from her tutoring class also testified on her behalf. They described Fungi as kind-hearted and caring, frequently cooking meals for the children, escorting them home, treating underprivileged students equally, and even waiving tuition fees. Many hoped the jury would show leniency. However, the prosecution questioned her voicemail about the insurance beneficiary, suggesting that Fungi might have tried to manipulate Jinshio with the charcoal incident and, upon failing, resorted to this method to shift blame. Fungi strongly denied this, insisting that her relationship with Jinshio was purely romantic, with no intent to harm her children. Fungi expressed profound remorse, stating that she didn't understand what karmic debt she must have had to lose both her children. In court, Jinshio claimed he had never performed the Inyang ritual with Fungi at the Guanyin Shenyang Temple, stating instead that he had spent over 18,000 Hong Kong dollars to spend 5 days with her at a luxury hotel. The defense attorney pressed Jinshio about whether Liang's taunt, "You're not even ranked as mistress number 9, might have triggered Fungi, to which Jinshio didn't give a direct response. Regarding the argument on that day, he mentioned that his long-standing diabetes affected his male function, making it impossible for him to boast about such matters, adding that he didn't recall the details due to being intoxicated. In a post-trial interview, Jinshio expressed regret over the children's deaths, claiming he intended to visit Fungi. However, after the trial, he disappeared, not even sending a wreath for the children's funeral. At the psychiatric treatment center, Fungi felt unbearable pain each time her children were mentioned, even expressing a desire to reunite with them. Thankfully, with the devoted care of family and friends, she gradually found hope to continue living. During her detainment, she reflected on her actions, writing letters to Tunmun District Councilor Joe Maiwa, expressing remorse and admitting that involving her children was selfish. She hoped for a shorter prison sentence to one day return to Tunmun to tutor children and give back to society. After receiving 2 letters from Fungi, Councilor Zhou Miaohua was moved and shared the letters with the court. On November 23, 2010, a jury of 5 men and 2 women reached a unanimous verdict. Fungi was not guilty of intentional murder, but guilty of manslaughter. The court set a maximum sentence of 10 years, but considering Fungi's remorseful attitude, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. The following year, Fungi appealed through her lawyer. In September 2011, the appellate judge determined that the original maximum sentence was too high and reduced her sentence to 4 years. Fungi's mother and family felt deep regret once she was imprisoned, visiting her every week, rain or shine. Meanwhile, Jinshir had completely disappeared from her life. Today, Fungi is out of prison, and we hope her life continues to improve. As for Jinshir, now 71 years old, he bore no legal responsibility in the case. Perhaps because many women bore children for him. They either cared for him or, like Fungi's mother, feared his supposed spiritual powers. No media outlets reported any subsequent legal issues involving Jinshir. Currently, he is said to be spending his later years in poor health, living a bleak life. Reflecting on these tragedies, we can see that Fungi's family, when they received her request to study abroad, had a chance to prevent all of this. Even something as simple as helping her buy a plane ticket or accompanying her to the airport might have prevented her from falling under Jinshir's control for more than a decade. This case provides us with a new understanding of scammers who pose as grandmasters and highlights the importance of self-protection. Story 4. On the afternoon of July 10, 2017, gentle golden sunlight bathed the bustling Buntat Street, one of Singapore's busiest commercial districts. The steady flow of people blended into the city's hectic rhythm. This peaceful yet vibrant atmosphere was suddenly shattered by an agonizing scream, causing the crowd to startle and turn anxiously toward the source of the sound. Outside a cafe, a young man stumbled out, clutching a bleeding wound in his abdomen. Before he could call for help, a man in his 60s wearing a white shirt emerged from behind, still gripping the gleaming knife, pursuing him. Faced with this sudden outbreak of violence, the terrified crowd backed away, no one daring to intervene. The elderly man suddenly shouted at those who tried to approach, "Don't touch him. He deserves to die, and I'm ready to go to jail." With those words, more knife blows rained down on the now weakening young man. The horrifying scene threw the street into chaos. Children's screams and women's frightened shrieks mingled with the victim's painful groans as he lay writhing on the sidewalk. While people frantically called the police, the perpetrator, with a cold expression, also pulled out his phone and calmly reported his crime to the police, requesting them to come to the scene. He then stood there watching the young man struggle on the ground until he became motionless. Strangely, a smile seemed to appear on the old man's face. For a moment, the crowd thought this elderly man might be mentally ill. The piercing sirens of police cars and ambulances broke through the suffocating atmosphere. But all rescue efforts were too late. The man died from excessive blood loss. What was the relationship between the elderly man and the deceased? And what deep-seated hatred could drive the old man to such savage actions? At the Singapore police station, information about the perpetrator quickly emerged, shocking the public. The violent elderly man wasn't mentally ill as people had speculated, but was Tan Nam Sung, a prominent figure in Singapore's business community. At 70, he was the founder of a renowned traditional shipping company, a true tycoon in the industry with considerable wealth. Even more surprising was the relationship between the perpetrator and the victim. Spencer Tapani, the unfortunate man, wasn't a stranger, but was Tan's eldest daughter's husband and the CEO of his father-in-law's shipping company. He was a successful businessman, regularly praised by local business magazines as a symbol of Singapore's elite class. The case of a millionaire father-in-law killing his son-in-law in broad daylight quickly dominated Singapore's headlines. However, as layers of truth were unveiled, both the case developments and public reaction took an unexpected turn. The big question was, what drove a successful businessman, a person once widely respected like Tan, to choose such a bloody resolution? During interrogation, Tan insisted this was an act of revenge, not for money or power, but for his daughter's pain. What were the deep-rooted causes that transformed family bonds into an irredeemable tragedy? From a 10-year-old immigrant child in Singapore, Tan had built his empire from scratch. Starting as a dock worker, with his intelligence and business acumen, he quickly recognized the potential of the shipping industry in Singapore. At 29, with saved and borrowed money, he established TNS Shipping during Singapore's maritime golden age. Through hard work and business insight, his empire steadily grew, expanding into real estate and entertainment, making him one of Singapore's notable millionaires. However, at the peak of his career, his wife passed away, leaving him with 3 daughters. Nevertheless, Tan resolutely carried both father and mother roles. He didn't remarry, but devoted all his love and material resources to his children while managing his business. This boundless love for his children would explain his extreme actions later. For his business empire, placed great hopes in passing it on to his children. Among his 3 daughters, he most highly regarded his eldest Tan Chungchin. Not only excellent in academics, she proved her practical capabilities by starting from an entry-level position in her father's company, gradually rising to management through numerous challenges and impressive achievements. This further strengthened the father's faith in his daughter. However, besides passing on his legacy, Tan had another concern: his daughter's marital happiness. Chung was so focused on her career that she didn't notice her youth slipping away, suddenly finding herself past 30 and still single. In Mr. Tan's opinion, his daughter will sooner or later get married and have her own family. Therefore, he often cares about and asks about his daughter's situation, and also tries to introduce her to some rich children or successful people around. However, Chung always showed indifference to these introductions and arranged meetings. Initially, didn't understand why, until during a company meeting, he learned from employees that Chung was secretly dating someone who worked right in their shipping company. Out of love for his daughter, Tan immediately went to HR to check information about this man. He wanted to see what kind of person could attract his daughter, as she had never been in a relationship before. This was a natural reaction for any parent wanting to ensure their child's partner was worthy of their trust and love. The information gathered left Tan in deep contemplation. Spencer Tapani, the man who had won his daughter's heart, was just a regular marketing employee under Chang's supervision. It was this superior-subordinate relationship that gave them more opportunities to meet and grow close, eventually developing romantic feelings. What worried Tan wasn't just the man's status or character. Spencer was 5 years younger than his daughter, had been previously married, and had a child from that marriage. His family background also concerned Tan. He still lived with his parents in public housing, accommodation for Singapore's lower middle class. The social status and living conditions gap between the two families was too large for the wealthy father to not worry about his daughter's future. Spencer's humble background made him an unlikely match. Even ordinary families would hesitate to accept such conditions for their son-in-law, let alone a wealthy family like the Tans. Yet Chung, raised in luxury, was adamant about choosing him as her life partner. This choice wasn't without reason. In Cheng's eyes, Spencer possessed the rare attractive features of someone of Chinese Indian descent. Standing at 6 feet 1 inch with a muscular build, he exuded strong masculinity. The 5-year age gap made Spencer appear even more vibrant and appealing to the older woman. Being inexperienced in matters of the heart, watching easily fell for Spencer's sweet words. A man who had been through marriage and knew how to win a woman's heart. Before this intense love, she believed she had found her destiny, completely losing her ability to judge clearly. Their relationship progressed rapidly, despite Tan's opposition. With his life experience, he couldn't accept his beloved daughter marrying a man who was not only poor, but also carried the burden of a failed marriage and a child from a previous relationship. But all the father's advice fell on deaf ears. His daughter's heart was already completely given to Spencer. For the daughter he had pampered since childhood, could only maintain the complex feelings of a helpless elderly father. Soon after, decided to marry Spencer. Tan, seeing things had reached this point, decided it was better to comply with his daughter's wishes and support the young couple. He quickly adjusted his mindset as a father and took a positive attitude toward his daughter's marriage. Unable to bear seeing his daughter suffer, he gifted the couple a luxurious villa as a wedding present and spent a large sum to organize an extravagant wedding. To outsiders, it seemed like a modern fairy tale, where a rich man's daughter and a poor young man found happiness together, blessed by a benevolent father. After marriage, Tam promoted Spencer to department head, while Chung gave birth to 3 children in quick succession. Although they had hired help to care for the children, Chung no longer had time for work. After such an extended break, she lost interest in returning to work. Meanwhile, Spencer received continuous promotions. Beyond being the chairman's son-in-law, Spencer himself worked very hard. This provided some consolation to Tan. His daughter devoted all her energy to caring for the family. A perfect little family was gradually built, husband managing work, wife tending to the home. Everything seemed like a perfect picture of happiness. But beneath this perfect exterior, hidden changes were quietly taking place. In some hearts, ambitions were growing like weeds in a beautiful garden. Spencer, the eldest son born into poverty carrying his family's expectations, had made a remarkable leap in social status through his marriage to Chung. From a cramped public housing apartment, he stepped into a world of luxury villas, expensive cars, and corporate power. Having acquired all this, Spencer began generously repaying his biological family, showing filial piety to his parents and relatives. These actions initially seemed blameless. Helping family when one achieves better financial conditions is commendable. However, in the process of showing affection for his biological family, Spencer seemed to forget about Cheng's feelings. Most notably, he unilaterally moved his parents and younger brother in to live with them without discussing it with his wife first. Spencer made the decision, then explained to his wife that the villa was spacious enough for everyone, even using the excuse that his parents could help look after the grandchildren. Put in this fait-accompli situation as a daughter-in-law, Cheng couldn't voice any objection, much less suggest his parents live separately. Spencer's influence in the company grew increasingly powerful as he rose to become second only to Tan. With Tan Cheng as his trump card, Spencer confidently placed his relatives in various company positions under different pretexts. All internal company decisions now fell under his management. Though aware of Tan's silent disapproval, Spencer deliberately pushed the boundaries with his father-in-law. In his mind, he had already envisioned a scenario. As long as he didn't cross certain lines, this empire would eventually fall into his hands. On this point, Spencer had accurately read both Tan's and his daughter's psychology. Tan understood that his daughter had devoted all her energy to caring for the grandchildren, leaving no time for work. His vast business empire needed a reliable successor. With health issues and no son, delegating authority to his son-in-law seemed like an inevitable choice for Tan. Spencer also showed good management skills, forcing him to follow the philosophy of keeping the big things, ignoring the small things, turning a blind eye to his son-in-law's petty actions to maintain the overall stability of the family and the company. Tan's gradual concessions silently wove together a tragic future that he couldn't have foreseen. Looking back, every catastrophe accumulated from small daily changes. Tan Ching entered marriage at a later age, making pregnancy and childbirth extremely difficult. Severe pregnancy symptoms left her exhausted. Seizing this opportunity, Spencer skillfully persuaded his wife to focus on family care while he would handle company matters. Thus, the valuable business relationships that Tan Ching had built over many years gradually transferred into Spencer's hands. Occasionally, Tan still tried to persuade his daughter to return to the company, as deep down he hoped his empire's heir would be his own flesh and blood. However, Cheng sincerely shared with her father that she wanted to dedicate her time to family and their 3 children, just as he had cared for her and her sisters years ago. Hearing these words from his daughter, Tan had to accept and respect Cheng's decision. He told himself that if his daughter trusted Spencer so much, then treating his son-in-law like his own son wasn't unreasonable. As long as the couple lived happily and peacefully, handing the company over to his son-in-law seemed like a logical choice. By 2015, as his health began declining, had to think about the company's future. He called his second daughter, who was developing her career elsewhere, to return, hoping she could quickly familiarize herself with the family business. However, soon after, successive revelations plunged Tan Namsing into ultimate despair. The first shock came from his second daughter. One day, she frantically approached her father, recounting how Spencer had expelled her from the company and revoked her access card. The deep-rooted cause stemmed from her discovery that Spencer's assistant was posting defamatory information about Tan Ching on social media, alleging she had mental health issues. When she stood up to defend her sister and got into a heated argument with the assistant, Spencer chose to side with his assistant rather than his sister-in-law. The tragedy didn't end there. In the months following the second daughter's return, Spencer conducted a great purge, firing numerous long-term employees and replacing them with his own relatives. Facing these actions, felt both angry and deeply worried about his eldest daughter's fate. During one meeting with her father, tears suddenly broke through Cheng's facade of happiness. The fears that had eaten away at the father's heart finally became a painful reality, something Tan had always tried to deny but silently dreaded. Through tears, the painful truth about Cheng and Spencer's marriage gradually emerged. Their marriage had been broken for a long time. 6 months earlier, a close friend had sent Cheng a screenshot from social media, a photo that shattered all her illusions about family happiness. The photo captured Spencer and an unfamiliar woman intimately together, celebrating the birthday of a child who appeared to be about 1 year old. The captioned "Happy Family" beneath the photo was like a knife straight to the heart of the pregnant wife. Scenes from recent years flashed before her eyes. Spencer's nights of alleged client entertainment extended over time, hours and days when he didn't come home. Yet, The wife's heart stubbornly refused to believe that the man who had once sworn eternal love could betray her so cruelly. In desperation, hired private investigators to follow Spencer, and the truth revealed was even more painful than she had imagined. The darkest moment in Cheng's life was witnessing a child running excitedly toward him, calling him Papa. While she had been foolishly waiting at home trusting him, he had been having an affair, secretly building another family, and even having a child out of wedlock. Afterward, she confronted Spencer directly with evidence of the affair and threatened to tell her father. At this point, the man's attitude immediately changed. Since he hadn't yet secured his grip on the company, if the matter was exposed at this time, all his previous efforts would become worthless, and he would lose his current luxurious lifestyle. Therefore, Spencer knelt down, crying pitifully, begging his wife for forgiveness. He blamed everything on his mistress, claiming he had been seduced and never expected her to become pregnant and have the child. This act of begging for forgiveness had only one purpose: to paint himself as an innocent victim and push all responsibility onto the other woman. Spencer even wrote a commitment letter, swearing to cut all ties with his mistress. These seemingly sincere promises were just as empty and false as his past vows of eternal love. This tactic proved effective with Chung, a woman inexperienced in matters of the heart. Moreover, thinking of their 3 children they had raised together, Chung, with her soft heart, decided to give Spencer a chance to reform. In 2015, the news of a 4th child came to Chung like a twist of fate. She naively believed this tiny new life would be the connecting thread mending their fractured marriage. But it was a painful illusion. If a man could betray his family despite having 3 children, how could a 4th child change him? The breaking point came when Chung discovered Spencer had not just one, but multiple mistresses. In desperation, she proposed divorce. But this is when Spencer's true face was fully revealed. When they couldn't reach an agreement about assets, this man showed ultimate cruelty. He not only wanted Chung to leave empty-handed, but was determined to gain custody of the children, as if wanting to strip away everything most sacred from the wife who had dedicated her entire life to him. During her sensitive pregnancy period, Cheng's already fragile emotional state became even more volatile. Spencer recognized this weakness and devised a cruel plan to turn his wife's pain into a weapon against her. He deliberately provoked and instigated Cheng's anger while secretly installing recording devices in their room. Every moment of Chung losing her composure, every outburst of anger from being betrayed and hurt was recorded with purpose. Spencer collected these videos and sent them to mental health facilities for evaluation, aiming to build a case proving his wife had mental health issues. This would be a double-edged sword in the divorce proceedings, not only taking away her custody rights, but also destroying Cheng's reputation. After hearing the accusations from his 2 daughters, Tan Namsung realized this was just the tip of the iceberg. A premonition of greater danger prompted him to immediately order a comprehensive financial audit of the company. The investigation results were exactly as he had suspected. Spencer had built an entire system of shell companies to embezzle enormous sums from corporate funds. The asset verification process also revealed that he had secretly accumulated multiple properties, including the house he used to hide his life with his second family, which Chung had discovered. Each revealed clue showed Spencer's conspiracy more clearly. Not only did he deceive her feelings, he also had the ambition to seize all of the Tan family's assets. Looking at his daughter's haggard face, the rage in Tan's heart burned like a raging fire, his teeth grinding. The empire he had spent his life building was being gradually usurped, his beloved daughter cruelly betrayed. These pains had exceeded the elderly father's limits of endurance. At this point, the only path forward was to convince Chung to quickly divorce the unfaithful man. But the problem was that Spencer adamantly refused to accept the divorce. He even performed an act before Tan, crying miserably, swearing to repent, promising to change. Those fake tears only fueled the flames of hatred in the heart of a father who had seen through his son-in-law's true nature. The wounds Spencer had inflicted on the Tan family were too deep to heal. Beyond the infidelity, the embezzlement of company funds to support his secret family, and his scheme to seize his father-in-law's assets had crossed the final line of tolerance. Chung, though heartbroken, remained resolute in pursuing divorce. When Spencer realized he could no longer maintain his grip, his evil nature fully emerged. He not only fabricated evidence about Cheng's mental state to gain custody of the children, but also shamelessly demanded asset division with the unconscionable argument that, while Chung was at home having children, he was the one who had shouldered the company's responsibilities, so he naturally deserved an equivalent share. Spencer completely forgot how he had been given such opportunities in the first place. He claimed that Chung had sacrificed her career to entrust everything to him. In reality, since joining the Tan family, Spencer had enjoyed preferential treatment far exceeding other managers, generous annual salaries and bonuses, not to mention the funds he had misappropriated. Yet Spencer's greed knew no bounds. The divorce proceedings dragged on like an endless battle, leaving deep scars on the entire family. Chung grew increasingly gaunt, her spirit crumbling under the pressure of legal battles and psychological attacks from her betraying husband. Meanwhile, the company fell into a crisis of capital turnover. Everything seemed to have fallen into an inextricable mess. During this time, Tan Nam Singh was in excruciating pain, utterly desperate. He knew Spencer's ambitions would be difficult to satisfy, so peaceful negotiation might not be effective. In a moment of intense emotion, the flames of anger erupted in Tan Nam Singh's heart, and simultaneously, an extreme thought entered his mind: to kill Spencer to prevent future troubles, believing this was the only way his daughter could have a peaceful life. And so, around 1:20 p.m. on July 10, 2017, Spencer was drinking coffee at a cafe on Tylok Air Street when Mr. Tan happened to see him. Thinking about how his family had been destroyed by this cruel situation, he could no longer contain himself. The anger in his heart erupted, and Tan calmly picked up a fruit knife and walked towards Spencer. Upon seeing Tan Nam Singh, Spencer was startled and stammered, "Father, father, father, why are you here?" Without a word, Tan stabbed him 3 times in the abdomen. Spencer clutched his bleeding wound and fled the store, running toward Buntat Street. But Tan naturally had no intention of stopping, continuing to pursue him with the knife. Finally, Spencer collapsed in front of a restaurant. Lying on the ground, he weakly called for passers-by to help, begging his father-in-law to spare him. However, anyone who tried to step forward was sternly stopped by Tan Nam Singh. He shouted to those present, "This man is my son-in-law, he's a bastard. Today I will definitely kill him. Even if I go to jail, I'll accept it." Spencer finally lost consciousness and lay in a pool of blood. At this point, Tan calmly put down the knife. Then he called his eldest daughter, speaking with complete composure, "Chung Chung, father has killed that bastard." On the other end of the line came Tan Chung Chung's painful crying, "Father, why did you do this?" Tan Nam Singh, as if a burden had been lifted, calmly replied, "Father couldn't sleep. Father has done it. Father killed him. Don't cry. Father is old. Father isn't afraid of going to jail." After hanging up, Tan calmly sat down and remained at the scene until the police arrived and arrested him. Spencer later died from excessive blood loss. The incident of Tan Nam Singh committing murder on the street that day shocked public opinion. Initially, people still fought to defend Spencer. But as the police investigation deepened, the bloody family drama behind the case gradually came to light before everyone's eyes. Only then did they realize he didn't deserve their sympathy. On August 20th, 2020, Tan Nam Singh's trial took place. Initially charged with intentional murder, after being diagnosed by doctors at the Institute of Mental Health as suffering from severe depression at the time of the crime, the final charge was reduced to manslaughter. Finally, on September 21st, 2020, Tan Nam Singh was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. One can understand that Tan Nam Singh was a father who wanted revenge for his daughter out of love. But nevertheless, he shouldn't have chosen such an extreme path that violated the law. After Spencer's death, his mother even demanded Chung pay $500,000 in support money. But Chung responded, "If Spencer and I hadn't married, he wouldn't have enjoyed this life. His entire family worked at my father's company, and I can't imagine what Spencer would have given them." Spencer had changed his fate through marriage and easily obtained wealth and power that would have been otherwise unattainable. Only then did he gradually reveal his true, despicable nature. As for Chung, she thought she had found true love. Later, it was proven that she had very poor judgment in people. When choosing a partner, besides looking at appearance, height, family background, and education, character is also very important. And this character can only be revealed over time. Compared to a marriage that must last for decades, spending more time getting to know your other half is actually very worthwhile. Story 5. On October 9, 2013, a shocking crime shook Kazakhstan. That fateful night, the BU restaurant, one of the most luxurious establishments in the capital city of Astana, became the scene of a horrific murder. Located in a prime location directly across from Kazakhstan's government headquarters, Bu Restaurant had long been a favorite destination for the elite. The venue regularly hosted high-ranking officials and prominent business people, with its clientele consisting exclusively of society's most influential figures. That afternoon, tension filled the air at the restaurant when important news arrived. Russian President Putin was in talks with the president of Kazakhstan at a government building just a block away, and there was a high probability that both heads of state would visit the restaurant that evening. Immediately, management decided to close to regular customers to prepare for these special guests. However, unexpectedly, on such an important day, a death occurred in one of the restaurant's VIP rooms. As news spread, some even suspected political machinations behind the incident. The victim was Sultanatna Kanova, a 31-year-old woman from a prestigious background. Born into a family with deep political connections and a successful businessman father, Sultanatna was the wife of Kwandaik Bishimbayev, Kazakhstan's former Minister of Economy. A woman of such high social standing would suffer unimaginably cruel treatment. At around 8 p.m., when medical personnel arrived at the scene, a heartbreaking sight awaited them. Sultanat lay motionless in a pool of blood, her body bearing horrific injuries. Her once beautiful face was swollen beyond recognition, her body covered in wounds, and she showed no signs of life. Despite the emergency team's desperate attempts at CPR, their efforts proved futile. They were forced to pronounce Sultanat dead at the scene. The forensic report revealed disturbing details. Multiple bruises around her ears and cheeks, with her nasal bones completely shattered. Most notably, there was an oval-shaped bruise on her neck, clear evidence of strangulation. But the most horrific finding was the direct cause of death, closed head trauma with intracranial bleeding at twice the lethal threshold. Experts determined that her head had been violently struck at least 10 times. Even more devastating was the discovery that just a month before this tragedy, Sultanat had suffered minor brain hemorrhaging. Her body bore a map of injuries, both old and intertwined, indicating she had endured physical abuse for an extended period. All evidence pointed to one person, the victim's husband, Kwandaik Bishimbayev, who was present at the restaurant when Sultanat drew her last breath. Police quickly named the former Minister of Economy, once a powerful figure in Kazakhstan's political arena, as their prime suspect. At age 43, Bishimbayev epitomized someone born with a silver spoon. His life had been a path paved with gold that ordinary people could only admire from afar. Born into one of Kazakhstan's most powerful business dynasties, Bishimbayev's father was an influential university president who maintained close ties with the former president. Everything seemed perfectly arranged for his ascent to power and prestige. Graduating high school at just 15, he earned admission to Kazakhstan National University. After completing his undergraduate degree, he furthered his ambitions by pursuing a master's degree at George Washington University in the United States. Armed with his advanced degree, Bishimbayev returned home and began a meteoric rise in politics. His career trajectory shot upward like a rocket. In 2007, at a remarkably young age, he was appointed Deputy Minister of Industry and Trade. Just 2 years later, he advanced further, becoming a presidential assistant. Not stopping there, the following year, he was entrusted with the role of Deputy Minister of Economic Development and Trade. His career peaked in May 2016 when Bishimbayev was appointed Minister of National Economy, becoming the youngest minister in Kazakhstan's history. With power firmly in his grasp, Bishimbayev could proudly reflect on his 10-year journey from bank director to head of the nation's economy. However, fate had other plans. It took just 7 months to destroy everything he had built. A $2 million bribery scandal led to a 10-year prison sentence. Yet, thanks to his extensive connections, he served only 18 months before being released. His personal life was equally tumultuous, with 3 marriages, Sultanat being his final wife. A UK-educated woman, Sultanat had initially shown promise in banking. However, fate led her down a different path when she discovered her passion for astrology. Born into wealth and free from financial concerns, she boldly left her stable career to pursue her passion, quickly finding success as an astrology consultant. With her captivating beauty and rare elegance, combined with professional expertise, Sultanat rapidly built a reputation in astrological circles. Her Instagram following quickly exceeded 10,000, and her consultation schedule was consistently full. Those seeking personal meetings had to book at least 2 months in advance. However, as the saying goes, fame comes with its troubles, and Sultanat's success brought its share of complications. Among her clients were many men captivated by her beauty, often using astrological consultations as a pretext for conversation and flirtation. This situation became so uncomfortable that she was forced to implement the strict policy. She would only consult with women or couples, completely refusing private meetings with male clients. In August 2022, a single glance at Sultanat's photo online was enough to enchant Bishambave. Rumors circulated that a mysterious prophecy during a fortune-telling session had guided him to Sultanat, a woman supposedly destined for him. Whether by fate or chance, Sultanat's beauty had truly captured the heart of the former minister, compelling him to arrange a meeting under the guise of seeking astrological consultation. As expected, Vishambave's request was promptly rejected. However, with his persistent nature and extensive network, he devised a more subtle approach. He enlisted a female friend to act as an intermediary, orchestrating a chance meeting with Sultanat. Under his friend's skillful persuasion, Sultanat finally agreed to meet. From that fateful encounter, their relationship developed at a dizzying pace. Despite being a father of 4 and 10 years her senior, Vishambav exuded a rare charm for a man in his 40s. With his youthful appearance suggesting someone barely in his 30s, commanding presence and eloquent speech, he bore none of the typical signs of middle age. These qualities quickly won Sultanat's heart. On December 16, 2022, after a brief courtship, they held an Islamic wedding ceremony. Though they hadn't legally registered their marriage, they became husband and wife in practice. For love, Sultanat willingly abandoned her flourishing career to devote herself to being a full-time homemaker. Little did she know that behind her husband's seemingly perfect exterior lurked a completely different person. Just 2 weeks into their marriage, Vishambave's perfect mask began to slip, revealing his terrifying true nature. In this tragic story, one person played a crucial role in Sultanat's life, her older brother, Aitbek. The siblings shared an exceptionally close bond, especially since Aitbek had witnessed his sister's near-fatal accident in childhood, leading him to be particularly protective of her. On December 31, 2022, Aitbek accepted an invitation to attend a party at his brother-in-law's mansion. What caught his attention was Sultanat's unusual behavior. Gone was his typically cheerful, optimistic sister, replaced by an anxious woman obsessing over every minute detail of the party decorations and preparations. Initially, Aitbek assumed his sister was just nervous about her first time hosting as the lady of the house, wanting everything to be perfect. However, when Bishambave's cousin unexpectedly arrived with a gift, he began to understand the true source of his sister's anxiety. The sudden appearance of the cousin and his wife put Sultanat in an awkward position. According to custom, not giving a New Year's gift would be highly improper. In a moment of quick thinking, she remembered an expensive perfume bottle in her room. She hastily wrapped it and presented it to her cousin-in-law. The recipient's radiant smile seemed to dispel the initial awkwardness. What should have been a perfect resolution turned tragic when Bishambav witnessed the scene. His face suddenly darkened like a stormy sky. Without warning, his angry shout echoed through the mansion. "Why did you give away the gift I gave you? You didn't consider my feelings at all." The outburst instantly shattered the festive atmosphere, causing all guests to turn in shock and discomfort. Vishenbav's parents and relatives at the party could only stand in astonishment at the incredible scene before them. This childish behavior over a taken toy was completely unbefitting of an adult, let alone a former government official. Yet it happened, exposing a frightening dark side to Bishenbav's character. In an attempt to salvage the situation, his parents tried to intervene, gently suggesting that this was a minor issue, that a perfume bottle held no special sentimental value. But rather than calming down, these sincere words only drove Bishambav into a greater frenzy. He turned on his own parents, hurling bitter words, accusing them of meddling in his private affairs. After Bishambav's outburst, the party atmosphere became unbearably tense. Guests awkwardly made excuses to leave early, while family members remained silent, pretending nothing had happened. But the fateful night wasn't over. Just after midnight, Vishambav lost control again, in his fury overturning the dining room table. A meticulously prepared New Year's celebration suddenly transformed into a scene of chaos and absurdity. Aitbek, who witnessed everything, felt deeply disturbed by his brother-in-law's unusual behavior. In his memory, Vishambav had always been a composed, dignified man. This sudden change filled him with concern for his sister's well-being. However, that night clearly wasn't the right time for confrontation. Despite his heavy heart, When Sultanat repeatedly assured him she would handle everything, Eightbeck reluctantly left, carrying with him grave concerns about his sister's fate. In the following days, despite Eightbeck's frequent calls to check on her, Sultanat consistently maintained that everything was fine. Her reassurances temporarily eased her brother's worries. However, just 3 months later, a horrifying truth would unfold before his eyes. On March 20th, 2023, Eightbeck received a photo from his sister that made his heart stop. In the image, Sultanat's once beautiful face was now disfigured with bruises around her eyes, her face swollen, and most painful of all, her eyes, once full of life, now appeared empty and soulless. Her entire body looked as withered as a dying flower. Though no explanation was given, Eightbeck instantly recognized that his sister was a victim of domestic violence. With his heart filled with both pain and rage, he immediately drove to his sister's mansion. But when he arrived, he found only Bishambave in the mansion, with no sign of his sister. More infuriating was Bishambave's cold, indifferent attitude, claiming he didn't know his wife's whereabouts. This irresponsible response nearly sparked a violent confrontation. However, thinking of his sister's safety, Eightbeck had to suppress his anger and end the conflict. Sultanat was safe, having taken refuge at her mother-in-law's house. When Eightbeck desperately urged his sister to come home with him and leave Bishambave, she hesitated. She claimed she couldn't yet abandon their relationship. "Marriage was my choice," she said. "When you're married, you must work to nurture it. Problems can be solved." She still believed Bishambave would change. Faced with his sister's stubbornness, Eightbeck left helplessly, his heart heavy with worry. He understood a harsh truth that his sister had yet to realize. In domestic violence, there is never just one time. It becomes a never-ending cycle. Each act of tolerance only encourages more brutal abuse. The victim's silence and forgiveness become pieces in the final tragic puzzle. By September 2013, at a family gathering, Eightbeck noticed fresh bruises on his sister's body. When he pressed for answers, Sultanat forced a smile, claiming they were from a massage therapist using too much force. This clumsy lie pierced her brother's heart. He knew the truth behind those wounds, but found himself in an impossible situation. In these circumstances, any confrontation with Bishambave would only make things worse for his sister. She might face even more savage beatings as punishment. And as long as Sultanat wasn't ready to leave this toxic marriage, any outside intervention could subject her to more terrifying abuse. The situation escalated beyond domestic violence on October 8th. According to Ida, Sultanat's close friend, that evening she accompanied the couple to a concert. There, Bishambave openly disrespected his wife by embracing, and even kissing other women's cheeks in front of everyone. This brazen behavior enraged Sultanat, leading to a fierce argument between them. After the concert, Ida bid farewell to the couple as they headed to the BAU restaurant. That was the last time she would see her dear friend alive. The next news she received was the devastating announcement of Sultanat's death. The biggest question on everyone's mind was, what really happened at BAU restaurant that fateful night? During police questioning, Bishambave maintained a suspiciously calm demeanor. According to his statement, they had a heated argument during dinner. Sultanat wanted to go to her brother's house, but he persuaded her to stay. They then drank heavily until both were intoxicated. Bishambave claimed his wife must have slipped in the bathroom, hitting her head on the toilet, leading to fatal brain hemorrhage. He emphasized that when he regained consciousness and discovered what happened, it was already too late, and his wife's death was purely accidental, having nothing to do with him. With arrogant confidence, Bishambave thought he had carefully calculated every detail. BAU restaurant was owned by his cousin, and all surveillance footage had been erased, leaving no trace. In his prideful mind, he believed the police would find no evidence to charge him. If necessary, with his wealth and extensive connections, bribing the jury to escape justice would be no challenge. However, these calculations proved to be naive delusions. Modern technology allowed police to recover all the restaurant's surveillance footage. Moreover, they found 12 videos on Bishambayev's own phone documenting his brutal torture of his wife. This irrefutable evidence exposed all of Bishambave's lies in court, revealing the true nature of a savage murderer. The first surveillance video captured events around 1 a.m. on October 9th. In the dimly lit hallway, Bishambave cornered Sultana against a wall. His right hand held a half-smoked cigarette, while his left hand gripped her face, forcing her to look into his eyes. Though still fully dressed, Sultana's face showed extreme exhaustion, her eyes attempting to avoid her enraged husband's gaze. but ultimately forced to comply. At 6:56 a.m., the cameras recorded them again. From VIP Room 1, Bishambave emerged with a ferocious expression followed by Sultanat, who wore only a thin black coat loosely draped over her body. Suddenly, like a wild beast losing all control, Bishambave turned and attacked Sultanat, knocking her to the floor. Not stopping there, he relentlessly kicked at her with his right foot, ignoring that she lay curled up and defenseless. Still not satisfied, Bishambave pulled Sultanat's semi-conscious body up. He pressed her against the wall, gripping her throat, then mercilessly punched her beautiful face. By this point, Sultanat was too weak to stand, but this did not stir any compassion in her husband. For a moment, Bishambave seemed to pause, stepping back a few feet. Yet his anger had not subsided. He abruptly turned again and dragged her by the hair into the bathroom once more. Through the keyhole gap, cameras captured Sultanat's last moment of hope. In a split second, she managed to get into the bathroom first, using her remaining strength to lock the door, desperately hoping for a chance to call for help. But this hope was quickly shattered as Bishambave kicked the door open. Inside the confined space of the bathroom, a new round of torture began, even more brutal than before. They remained in the bathroom for over 70 minutes, the most horrifying period in Sultanat's life. Though there were no surveillance cameras inside, Bishambave himself recorded his crimes on his phone, as if proudly documenting his brutality. The continuous verbal abuse, savage beatings, and degrading acts never ceased. His venomous words cut like sharp knives, inflicting wounds not just on her body, but destroying her soul. For 8 endless hours, Sultanat endured both physical and psychological torture. Each passing moment felt like a century for the woman trapped in this living hell. Around 9 a.m., in a semi-conscious state, Sultanat was dragged into VIP Room 1 by Bishambave. This was the last time cameras captured her alive. Behind those VIP room doors were the final moments of a beautiful life, destroyed by the cruel hands of the husband she had trusted and loved. This was a long and merciless torture session. As death's shadow gradually crept over Sultanat, what did Bishambave do? Instead of seeking help, he carried out a series of bizarre actions. First, he ordered his cousin to delete all surveillance footage from the restaurant. Then he had his cousin walk around with Sultanat's phone to create an illusion that everything was normal. At around 2 p.m., with Sultanat still unconscious, instead of seeking medical help, Bishambave made the strange decision to call a psychic. When the psychic advised taking her to a hospital, Bishambave flew into a rage, shouting that he refused to do so. The psychic then reluctantly provided a reading, saying there was nothing to worry about, that Sultanat was just sleeping. Reassured by this, Bishambave casually left the crime scene to meet a celebrity at the very same BU, where his wife lay unconscious. The meal lasted over an hour, as if nothing serious was happening, as if his wife's life meant nothing to him. By 5 p.m., seeing Sultanat still showing no signs of consciousness, Bishambave began to panic. He sent his cousin to buy a mixture of carbonate, ammonia, and aromatics, a stimulant that releases ammonia gas to trigger respiratory response in unconscious people. However, ammonia gas can be severely toxic to the human body, potentially lethal if inhaled in large quantities. Despite the dangers, Bishambave sprinkled the substance under his wife's nose, but Sultanat remained motionless as a statue. Still refusing to face reality, he continued texting the psychic, seeking meaningless reassurance. Once again, after receiving a positive response, he lulled himself into the delusion that everything was fine. At 7:07 p.m., in another bizarre move, Bishambave texted a religious worker asking if they were available. It took over 10 minutes to receive a response. At this point, Bishambave's cousin, who had witnessed everything, finally broke down and called for emergency help. But it was too late. Sultanat's fragile life had slipped away during those hours of senseless waiting. Bishambave could have saved his wife's life, but his series of bizarre actions cut off her last chance at survival. In doing so, he also buried his own future. This horrific murder occurred at a highly sensitive time and quickly became the focus of attention throughout Kazakhstan. A wave of outrage spread across the country, forcing authorities to take decisive action. President Tokayev personally intervened, issuing special directives requiring the Interior Ministry to closely monitor and supervise every development in the case. Before the trial, an unexpected development occurred when social media users collectively published the personal information of all jury members. This was a deliberate move, like a sword hanging over each juror's head, reminding them of their heavy responsibility. If any juror considered bending the law, they would face the endless fury of the Kazakh people. On May 13, 2014, justice was finally served. The Supreme Court of Kazakhstan sentenced Bishimbayev to 24 years in prison for murder. His accomplice cousin didn't escape justice either, receiving a 4-year sentence for concealing the crime. During the investigation, police discovered a letter in the apartment written by Sultanat in October 2023. Through trembling handwriting, one could understand the ultimate pain of this unfortunate woman when she discovered the cruel truth. False eyelashes, lipstick marks on the marriage bed, and used condoms in the trash. Undeniable evidence of her husband's betrayal. In this painful moment of clarity, Sultanat realized how naive she had been, protecting a false love alone, even enduring brutal beatings for it. When she finally found the courage to decide to leave, it was too late. Cruel fate didn't give her a chance to escape the claws of the demon masquerading as her husband, and the tragedy unfolded in the most painful way possible. Sultanat's death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It became a catalyst for major social change in Kazakhstan. Over 120,000 people signed a petition demanding fundamental legal changes to protect women. Their voices were heard when the government enacted the Sultanate law against domestic violence, a crucial milestone in Kazakh women's fight for gender equality. Thus, although Sultanate is gone, her legacy lives on through the law bearing her name, continuing to protect other women from the pain she endured. Her death was not in vain, but rather awakened an entire society, promoting positive changes to prevent similar tragedies in the future.